Welcome back. You're watching a special programme on the coronavirus outbreak. Time now for us to try to answer your questions on COVID-19. Joining me are the urgent care doctor, Kishan Rees, and Simon French, who is chief economist at Panmure Gordon. Simon, before we get on to the viewers' questions, very briefly, how serious is what we've witnessed today and how long does it last?
Well, in the context of financial market moves, it's the biggest one-day move we've seen in more than 10 years. How long does it last? Well, today was a fear event. What was basically happening is traders said, we can't really price the COVID risk. We're not quite sure. There was an oil story going on between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And until that can be priced more narrowly, this is going to be quite open-ended. This will go for some time. Yeah,
OK. Simon, I mean, it's the first day we've had a lot of questions on the stock markets and as well as health. So this is one. Should I panic if I'm drawing a pension in 5 to 10 years' time?
Well, panic is never a good emotion if you're planning for your retirement. Certainly if you're looking on a 5 to 7 year horizon, the likelihood is, when you look at stock market return charts over many, many decades, events like this, which feel very, can generate much anxiety in the short term, are rarely seen as more a blip on an upward trend. And therefore, I would suggest, if you haven't got a near-term event where you're going to need to tap into that pot of money, then just sitting this one tight, seeing how it evolves, seeing how the economics evolve, because at the moment, some of the very sharp moves in prices are based on fear. And that, at some moment, will start to pass and be able to reprice this more accordingly.
Yeah, and I mean, we just touched on it before we got onto these questions. In terms of how long, that depends, you think, on how the sort of arc of the virus.
I think that's absolutely right. As you look at the economic disruption, why are share prices off today? It's because investors are calculating that companies are going to be able to make less profits going forward. They're going to have their workforces disrupted, they're going to have their supply chains disrupted. But on a long-term view, we would expect a virus to peak, and then off the back of that, you would expect business to go back to its operating model of before, and therefore largely make the profits it was making before, and therefore share prices should return over a medium-term view, certainly in the perspective of this viewer who's talking about a 5 to 7 year horizon, should return to normal.
OK, back on the economic questions, we were asking, should people panic? Someone asks, is this a good buying opportunity? I mean, there will be those, I suppose, as the market just plunges, be thinking about that.
If you're a professional investor, you might think you want to time your entry into the market in terms of when you put money into shares. But for the vast majority of your viewers, the sensible thing to do is to drip feed money into the stock market over time. It's not to try and call the bottom of a cycle, because very many smart people over many years have tried to do that and lost fortunes. It's not a sensible way. Over time, the most sensible thing to do is to even out your luck by dripping it in each month, each quarter, and kind of trying to put the emotion of the headlines on days like today. It's very hard, I acknowledge, but try and put those to one side.
Yeah, it's a very difficult time for the elderly because of the health side of this, and then they see the value of their pensions falling like this. Simon, again on Twitter, the government has given no guidance to businesses, whatever. What do we do in cases to protect ourselves? I assume whether they mean themselves physically or their businesses. I run 2 businesses. How do I protect my staff and I?
Well, the first thing to say, there is a lot of government advice out there. It's on gov.uk, and then there's the health advice through the Chief Medical Officer. I think perhaps the question will be sort of focused on me from the perspective, how does he keep 2 businesses running at a time when we're being given advice around isolation, home working, trying to encourage or limit the spread of this virus. And in that regard, if he's running 2 businesses, or if he or her is running 2 businesses, I would suggest that they explore the ways in which they can be flexible, because none of us know, from a medical standpoint, from an economic standpoint, how it'll evolve from here with any great certainty. And therefore, providing the flexibility to adapt is probably the best way he can protect his business in terms of still serving his customers and still making sure he or she can produce for his clients over a protracted period of time, regardless of what the disruption looks like.
And just on this issue, what can we expect the government to do? I don't mean in terms of businesses necessarily. I mean after a market collapsed like this, can we expect any government intervention?
Yes, we can.
To try and stem the sort of worst effects of this?
Well, we do have a budget on Wednesday, and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak will make a statement to Parliament around what support the government will provide to businesses and also to households, potentially on increasing the eligibility to statutory sick pay for those in the gig economy, for businesses in terms of providing advice or support in terms of cash flow, and instructing HMRC to be much more cooperative with allowing them longer periods of time in order to pay their tax bill. But then we've also got the Bank of England. The Bank of England potentially cuts interest rates this month, and for a lot of people with mortgages,
still pretty low, aren't they?
They're 0.75%, they're potentially going lower, and also providing forbearance advice to lenders to not draw in credit to solvent businesses.
Right, OK, we're riding two horses here, the economy and health. So, Kishan, just a last word from you.
I mean, on that point with the budget and Rishi Sunak, I think he's saying that NHS will get everything that it needs, and I hope it does in terms of resources. That's really important. Your viewers will know that I've been on for many years talking about it's been run down and there's been problems. One potential thing that should be looked at is we're getting people having to retire early as a result of the pension tax and the taper. So these are consultants that are not at risk. Rather than calling old consultants back that are 60, 70, 80 and long retired, these are people in their 50s that might be retiring. So I'd implore the Chancellor, if he's watching, to have a look at that and think about it, and give as much support as possible to the people in the NHS on the front line.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he is watching, so he's heard what you had to say. Kishan, thanks very much, and Simon, thank you to you too. Thank you. Well, one of the economic side of